Recording. Recording pending. Okay. Let's wait until it's not pending. No, it's not pending.
It's recording.
Hello, everyone. This is Thomas Jäger, the CEO of ch-Aviation, and I'm talking today again to Addison Sonland, the partner at AirInsight, as we do every now and then. Thanks a lot for your time today.
Great to be with you again, Thomas.
So I think one of the first things we want to do is talk a bit about how the Russian invasion in Ukraine has impacted aviation. We talked about that in the past.
Right.
From your perspective, how wrong or right were we when we talked about it last time, or what has changed for the airlines that are affected by it? I mean, obviously, I would say let's first talk about the ones that are immediately affected by it.
So I think clearly there's been no commercial progress in terms of airlines. Obviously, nothing is flying service there, but I did see a beautiful thing done by Air Baltic, the lease of Ukraine International Airlines 737, and I believe they did a wet lease with the crew, which I think is a magnificent gesture.
But it's not just Air Baltic, it's also SkyUp is flying for Air Moldova, and they got a contract to fly, I think, 6 aircraft for Turkish Airlines. So in a sense, I guess because operations in Europe are expected to be that unstable this summer, there is going to be a higher demand than usual for wet lease.
Right.
These aircraft are now available, so I think that's kind of what drives that as well.
Right, but I think that, yes, of course, it's a business decision, but it's also there's an inherent kindness here. There are people that need jobs. There are people there's equipment that needs to be used. There's a company that needs to have its assets put to work, and I think it's a magnificent gesture from the broader aviation community in Europe, and including Turkey, to actually make this work. I think it sends a fantastic signal in the midst of the craziness, that the pandemic, the war, and if you think of all the shocks the industry suffers, that it's able to turn to what a year ago was a competitor to say, you know what, let's make this work. And I think it's very heartwarming.
No, but I mean, I have done everything I could as well to help them with data and offer them whatever I can give them, so that they can look around and look at what wet lease opportunities exist and what happened in the last few years. But I think, as I said, we are going to see a very, very operationally rough summer in Europe. Right. And I think that's what's driving a lot of that, more than them wanting to help the airlines. It's just that right. I am convinced that it's going to be, I don't know if I should use the word clusterfuck that I used internally, but it's going to be a very, very rough summer where I think airlines are going to really struggle to operate the flight programs that they have planned. And you see it all over the place. I mean, you see British Airways trying to set up temporary crew bases in Spain, wet leasing in or moving Iberia Express aircraft to Gatwick to be able to fly at least some of the schedule they have planned, them canceling lots of flights. You have Lufthansa wet leasing in aircraft from Air Baltic, among other carriers. So it's Air Baltic flying for Lufthansa, Air Baltic instead wet leasing in other aircraft to backfill that on a scale that we have never seen before. And then I hear from really all of the suppliers along the value chain, no matter where you go, be it airports, be it spare parts providers, be it the airlines themselves, that there is staff shortages, there is supply chain issues, and some of these are little details. But without now naming the companies I talked to in particular, but I talked to one airline CEO who told me he has never ever seen such a high number of wet lease requests from all kinds of different airlines all over Europe, that if aircraft that are being delivered late, the aircraft are being delivered late because there is not enough spare parts available. And when there are spare parts available, they can't be shipped fast enough. There are all of these staff shortages because people cannot be hired and trained fast enough. If you're owning a cabin crew training facility, if you own a technical training school, no matter what you would own in this direction, you're completely sold out. If you're a spare parts trader, you likely have lots of spare parts that people would want to buy that you can't get your hands on because they are not available. So I think that the recovery is going better than people would have expected. On the other hand, it's a lot harder to ramp back up than people expected. And I think that's why you have these issues all over the place. At airports, there are massive issues with ground handlers not being able to get enough staff. You've seen, I guess, the story about Lufthansa not being able to cater some of its flight because their catering provider doesn't have enough staff. Security is an issue because you need to, not only need to find people that want to do the job, but they need to get their security clearances or need to get their airport passes, which they can't get fast enough. So it's everywhere, lots of constraints.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing because, as you clearly are pointing out here, across the board, we're talking about disruption to ops.
Yeah.
The supply is not able to keep up with the demand, and that speaks to the recovery. But an industry that needs to recover financially is struggling again.
Yeah,
let the good times roll, and now they're rolling too good in for many people.
Yeah, but I mean, it's in a sense, I could sit here and say, look, I was smarter, and I assumed demand will come back faster than you thought it would. But if you are sitting, both of us are just being armchair. We're not armchair CEOs in the sense that we're running business, but we're armchair airline CEOs in the sense that we were not the ones that had to sit there when the industry was hit the way it was hit, making these decisions on how many people we let go, how many people we only put on short-term work, and how we are going to how many aircraft are you going to put into the desert, and thinking that you're going to get them out of the desert again easily.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of these things were unknown to people when they had to make the decision. So it was really, really hard to plan. And I mean, this is an industry where, I think, I don't know who wrote that. One of the journalists writing for the Wall Street Journal, I think, wrote a piece at the beginning of the pandemic saying this is an industry where, with amazing precision, he was able to say what the demand would be on a Tuesday afternoon between Washington Reagan and Chicago O'Hare, months in advance, and that would be able to plan accordingly and set fares accordingly and so on. And all of this is out of the window because everything is different now.
Correct.
So it's not as crazy as it was in the middle of the pandemic where you could only plan 2 weeks out. But I mean, who could have predicted in February when in my home country in Switzerland, we were down to like 20% of capacity, that we would be back at 80%, and 80% wouldn't be enough, and you wouldn't have the staff and everything around it to make that. So it's difficult to blame people and say, all of you screwed up the planning, but I mean, how can you have predicted that?
It's interesting. I think you're right. One doesn't have to be critical of the leadership in these companies because, quite honestly, no one knew. There's no lesson from before that they could have applied. But I think that you touched on a fascinating point here about security clearance. If you work on the air side of an airport, you have to have security clearances.
Yes.
And you are trying to bring all these people back in. Now, many people that left the industry are not coming back. In fact,
and I think, if you look at the ground handling case, if you were a baggage handler I'm in Croatia today, if you're a baggage handler at Zagreb Airport, where day in, day out, you start working at 5 a.m. in the morning, or you end your shift at 1 a.m. at night, it's raining, it's snowing, it's 38 degrees Celsius heat in the summer, and you realize, I can do the same job working in a warehouse for DHL or Amazon,
air conditioned
and stuff around, but there's a roof over my head and it's always the same temperature no matter what day or time of the year it is. And I get paid more. Why would I go back to the airport? Probably I would only go back to the airport if I would get paid more at the airport again. But what's the likelihood the industry is going to finally get out of that downward spiral on just cutting costs out of the entire ground handling operations?
And of course, there's also the provision of the badging for people to work on the air side. That's essentially going to be a government somewhere doing those kinds of security approvals.
Right.
Government employees are not paid to work quickly. That's just not the nature of the beast. I'm not criticizing, it's just the way it is. If you deal with,
but I mean that's something that you could mitigate in a sense. I mean,
how? I mean, you know,
well, there is governments that are faster at doing stuff than others. And I mean,
yeah, not everybody is Singapore.
No, I mean, I'm from Switzerland, and sometimes they stress me out with the fact of how efficient they are. If you want something and an hour later they call you back and tell you that they're done, but they have some questions, and then you're like, okay, that was a bit fast. Could you please not stress me out that much? But these are things that could be mitigated, and I mean, I'm sure the governments are seeing that these are issues. And if you look at all of the news stories coming out of the UK that these airport passes are a serious issue, that's something that probably could be addressed and probably will get addressed in some shape or form, because you don't want.
Heathrow is a complete mess from what from the news reports I'm seeing.
I don't know. I've been there myself recently, but all I did was getting out of the tube and getting on a bus, so I can't.
Right. Well, the thing is that I take it that we should all be well and in good health, but we will see each other in Farnborough, and we're going to have to go through the madness of getting into and out of the UK. So that's going to be an interesting thing.
But I mean, to speak to that, I think that is, I wouldn't say that you can categorically say that it is like this, because I've been in the UK several times in the last few months, and my experience has been top notch. I mean, I have been into Luton, and my wait time in immigration was a minute. I have been into Stansted, and it was maybe 7. So it's there are other countries that are still significantly stricter with how they do immigration than the UK, which pretty much has gone back to scan your passport, walk out the door. So I don't think you can just say that it's the UK government that is creating these entry delays. I think there was an issue. There was an issue back until January when they had strict entry regulations, but they are now gone and they're back to the usual mode of letting people come and go.
But actually, that's good to hear that you've had good experience there. But I think to your point, though, generally across the board, there seems to be recovery coming in much faster than anybody could have predicted.
Yeah.
And I think that's a global thing.
Yeah, and I mean, some of that, if you think about it around 3 corners, and I don't know if you've touched on that before, but I keep hearing the same story again and again. And last Friday, IAG put out their quarterly results, and they said the same thing again. One of the things that is extraordinary about this situation, which you've never seen before, is the number of people that are paying for premium classes to travel for private reasons, and that seems to keep everyone in airline revenue management really happy right now.
Sure.
And it's logical in a sense, because people saved a lot of money and now they're spending it on fun stuff for themselves, including travel. The question is how. I mean, one question I ask myself when I hear that again and again and again, and as I said, I think by now it's not news anymore and everyone knows about that, is how much longer is that going to last? Because at some point, theoretically, you should see people going back to normal spending behavior, because you can only spend that money that you have saved once. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Sure.
So I'm going to the Maldives and I'm flying business class this time, even though I was not able to afford that before. It's probably not going to happen for the next 7 years. So at some point, we will have to get back to having solid corporate demand for these premium cabins as well. Otherwise, it's not going to add up.
I think that what we're also seeing, certainly we're seeing this in the States. Every flight is full.
Mm.
Every flight is full. Now there's a talk about shortage of pilots. Well, I think that we realized that in February 2019 there was a pilot shortage. By March there was a pilot surplus.
Right.
And then of course a lot of the senior pilots in the States were offered early retirement packages to get them off the payroll and onto the pension plan.
Yeah.
Now, of course, traffic's coming back and you don't have enough pilots. Where you don't grow these people in 5 minutes.
Yes.
So I think that besides the operational impact, what we're seeing is there's this huge demand to travel. And I think that as you've mentioned, I mean, it's pent up. And very often, I think people are saying, listen, I've got to get a seat. Mm. I need to be there. Okay, so it's going to cost more. I mean, give an example. I'm flying to Tel Aviv at the end of the month in premium economy, $3,500 round trip. That's incredible. I've never seen a price like that.
No, I mean, I see some markets where prices are like that, but there's also other markets where prices are really low. So it still goes both ways, because as I said, the entire demand versus supply planning is still not the way I guess it's supposed to be, where it's relatively predictable. Right. That's causing these spikes in both directions, because there's unpredicted demand and there is unpredicted lack of demand. Right. But I mean, what I'm seeing as well is that we're seeing a lot more cancellations than normal. So that's again caused by everything that we have just discussed. And obviously that's also not good for consumer confidence if people book and then they end up not traveling because airlines cancel on them. I guess in Europe typically more than 2 weeks before because of the rules here, but on compensation. But it's just a difficult environment to plan in because of all of the factors that you have. On pilot shortages, you're totally right. I mean, this issue was something that was coming up anyway, and it has something to do with how many people are flying in which generation, and at some point these people were going to retire. And I guess in the US you have this artificial limit that was created on the entry barriers that is really high, with 1,500 hours that people need to fly. And I mean, I think in the last couple of days we have now seen some of the regional carriers essentially screaming for help, saying that if we don't fix that, we are not going to be able to fly these flights anymore, and smaller communities in the US will just lose service and not have it. And I mean, SkyWest announced that they're planning to stop all of their essential air service routes. And I think that the Department of Transportation doesn't let them, because they can tell them you have to continue flying it. But essentially that's SkyWest trying to get rid of the things that they can get rid of without annoying their legacy carrier customers too much, because these flights were at their own risk, and the rest was on behalf of the majors. But every regional carrier in the US has an issue that their major airline customers would like them to fly more, but they can't because they don't have the pilots. And why don't they not have the pilots? Because their customers have stolen their pilots. So.
Right, it's unbelievable. It's if it wasn't realistic, you think this would be the Kafka airline business model.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the global perspective of this, there were lots of Western pilots flying in the Gulf, flying in China, that have been laid off, furloughed, put on short-term work as a result of the pandemic. If China reopens, and it will at some point, if China reopens and is back to normal demand, they don't have enough pilots to fly all of these airplanes.
A lot of those pilots from China and the Gulf have come back to the States because there's work there now, and you can sleep in your own bed.
Yes. So, but what's going to happen then? I mean, they are going to come back on the market again. All of these pilot employment agencies are going to have time of their lives, because they're all going to be running around offering the best offers ever to go back to
Correct.
China, fly there again, and you're going to see these crazy pilot salaries coming back, where it's going to be whatever.
Well, the
3
thing
weeks,
is that
3 weeks on, 2 weeks off, I pay you twice as much as what you get in the US.
right,
So
and the thing is it's
not going to get better anytime soon.
It's a unionized industry, so what are you gonna do? What I would like to talk with you about also here is fuel prices, because that seems to me so strange. There is no fuel shortage. There's no oil shortage. But because of the craziness and we're back to where we started, I guess, with the Russian invasion. But energy prices are unbelievable. And airlines are getting hurt. And
Yes.
of course, how long do you think it's going to be before we start seeing airlines charging a fuel premium like they did in the bad old days?
Well, that I don't think is going to take very long, because at some point you have to make up for these costs and you just have to charge fuel surcharges. But it's also always a question of whether you can actually force that into the market. And I think right now, part of the problem is that demand is not so strong that you can just do that without creating a bigger demand issue. But at the end of the day, it's a cost versus revenue question. And if you cannot pay for the cost of these flights, then flights are going to get canceled either way.
Right.
But I expect that with the combination of COVID employment support measures running out everywhere, with the usual downward bump that you see in advance bookings that happen in October, November, we should go back to the normal way how the industry behaves, where the fall is the big bankruptcy season of the airlines, because that's when they have the smallest revenue inflows, and that's when typically the weak airlines go out of business. That didn't really happen the last 2 years because of COVID, which is weird, but it's obviously caused by the fact that everyone got bailed out by governments in one shape or form. If they didn't get bailed out by governments, then they got rent relief from lessors and suppliers making deals with them in one to keep airlines afloat or alive or flying, whatever you want to say. That is not necessarily going to happen again now. So I suspect that October, November will be when we see a wave of bankruptcies again. One thing that you see as well now, it's obviously also driven by COVID and all of the effects that we have on demand right now, is that there's a massive amount of consolidation going on. And so far, a lot of that consolidation has been focused on North America, and obviously it started in Latin America.
You saw the news overnight, right?
Yeah. So I suspect that we will see that all over the place as well. So I would say it's going to be consolidation and bankruptcies all over the globe, starting probably on the consolidation side earlier and on bankruptcies later in the year.
October, November.
Yeah. That's in a sense natural, and many airlines are still around because there was COVID. They would have probably gone bust before. So.
Interesting. Great conversation, Thomas.
Thanks a lot for your time.
Always.
Take care.
Thank you.